Good afternoon, fourth grade champions. Hope you're doing well today. We are continuing our book read, Out of My Shell by Jenny Goebel. This is a new book for me. I haven't read this book and I'm enjoying the story. Interested to kind of determine the twists and turns of this particular story as she navigates her Florida vacation. So we're continuing today, and I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and start at the top of page 6. The top of page 6, Out of My Shell. There were slight differences, though, things Lainey didn't pick up on, but I did. My grandparents held Mom a tad tighter and a fraction of a minute longer than usual. For the first time ever, Grandma didn't comment on how much I resemble my father. Grandma, Grandpa, Lainey said. She tugged our grandmother out of her embrace with Mom by the back of her sleeveless blouse. Look, Lainey pointed to the pink hole in her bottom gum. And our grandparents peered in as if they'd uncovered the 8th wonder of the world. Everyone made a huge fuss over the lost tooth while ignoring the fact that Dad wasn't there. I turned away from the group, unable to feign interest in my sister's dental development, and saw Aiden standing on the front lawn of the Beachcomber Inn next door. He was taller than last summer, and his hair was different, longer. He wore new glasses. As good as it was to see my summer friend, my legs felt wobbly as I walked toward him. He had to have noticed my dad was missing, and I dreaded explaining why. I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I waved quickly, then shoved them into my pockets. Aiden's grandfather was the caretaker at the inn, and Aiden had been visiting since we were both in diapers. He had always been quiet yet playful. He inserted funny faces into conversations instead of words. He cracked jokes after barely saying anything for hours. 1,000 times he'd snuck up on me just to give me a fright. I thought our friendship might be the one normal thing left about Florida. I stuck my tongue out, trying to initiate our usual banter, and immediately regretted it. Instead of twisting his features around or mimicking me like I expected, he tipped his head, questioningly. He knew me well enough to know something was wrong. I couldn't escape Dad's absence. It was hovering over me even now, making my reunion with Aiden as uncomfortable as everything else. At least Aiden smiled. When he did, his lopsided grin revealed smooth, straight, white teeth, no more braces. It was then I realized how much older he looked this summer. I felt instantly self-conscious about the purple plastic headband I'd borrowed from Lainey and the lacy frills on my sleeves. The 1-year age difference between Aiden and me had always seemed meaningless before. In that moment, though, I felt embarrassingly young, standing in front of him. Hi, I said, then shifted my gaze to the inn behind him. Apparently, this was the summer for drastic changes. Wow, the Beachcomber looks so different, I muttered, thankful it gave me something to talk about other than my absent father. I could tell Aiden was still wondering what was up with me and my family, but he was too polite to ignore my comment. He rotated, causing the frame of his body to expand while he glanced at the Beachcomber behind him. His broadening shoulders made his torso seem more kite-shaped than the beanpole he'd always been. I know, he said. The grand reopening was last weekend. Grandpa's new boss, a dark expression clouded his face, remodeled the entire property over the winter. Oh, was all I could think to say. When Aiden squared his shoulders back toward me, his eyes darted to where my mom and grandparents were gathered around Lainey. I knew exactly what he wanted to ask. Before he had a chance, I blurted, I should get back. I haven't seen my grandparents since last summer. They probably want to hear all about my year. Catch up later? Sure, he said. I could hear the disappointment in his voice, but I averted my gaze so I wouldn't have to see it in his eyes. As I walked away, he called out, I'm glad you're here, Olivia. I turned my head and smiled weakly at him. Thanks. I hoped things would feel less strange indoors. They didn't. My family trailed in behind me. Lainey insisted on going to the beach right away and dragged Mom out the back door with her. Grandma drifted close, chattering away as Grandpa took multiple trips to lug in all of our luggage. Did you drink enough water on your way here, Olivia? I always seem to get dehydrated when I travel. She didn't wait for my answer before filling me a glass with water from the fridge and plowing right along. What were your grades like last year? All A's, I bet. You're such a stellar student. While Grandma circled around me, she was unnaturally smiley. Did you notice the renovation next door? The beachcomber had gotten to be such an eyesore it rarely filled, but now they're having to turn away vacationers. Oh, and did your mom tell you? Cousin Gertrude has a suspicious mole on her left shoulder. Grandma was a retired dermatologist, so updates on other people's skin conditions were a common occurrence. As she blabbered on, I replayed the conversation I'd had with Aiden in my head. I shouldn't have left so abruptly. Maybe I should have explained about my dad. My hand shot up to the stupid plastic headband I was wearing. I remembered the look on Aiden's face when I stuck my tongue out at him. A nervous giggle bubbled in my throat, and I grimaced at the same time. Grandma halted her story to say, I don't see how squamous cell carcinoma is funny. I shook my head. It's not, I said solemnly. The day was getting to me. All this pretending everything was normal and fine was exhausting. I was afraid the slightest little thing might cause me to dissolve into tears. But I couldn't lose it now. If I did, we might all fall like dominoes. I'd never seen Mom look so pale or Dad so severe as when they'd sat Lainey and me down to break the news. Divorce. The blow was like nothing I'd felt before. Even though a few weeks had passed since they told us, the pain was still ricocheting in my bones. It was behind us, though. We'd made it to Florida. I wouldn't let my family down by ruining the trip. I'm going to check on Mom and Lainey, I said, see what they're up to. Grandma nodded her head, and I bolted for the back door. Mom was standing at the edge of the surf. Lainey was chasing and letting herself be chased by the waves. Satisfied they were having fun, I retreated indoors. As soon as I reached my room on the top floor, I pulled out my phone. There were so many things I could have texted. Dad, I miss you so much. Are you doing okay? Maybe even, why is this happening to us? I settled for, we made it. He immediately texted back with emojis, thumbs up, dolphin, smiley face with sunglasses. Apparently, words were hard for him too, right now. As miserable as I felt, how much worse was this summer going to be for him? He was all on his own. Before we left, Dad told me to have fun. Sure, I'd answered unconvincingly. Look, I don't want you to waste your summer because of a decision your mom and I made. Go, do what you enjoy, learn new things, then tell me all about it. He'd always loved summers in Florida. I made a mental note to send photos whenever I could. The rest of the afternoon was spent unpacking. Then after dinner, my mom and grandparents sat around talking politics and telling stories about people I'd never met. I was bored to death, but Mom frowned when Lainey wiggled out of her chair and made a break for the TV. So I stayed. While I listened to Grandma recount her childhood, I did my best to smile, even though I secretly craved time to myself. Time to be myself, without having to worry about how my mood would affect everyone around me. When my family finally went to bed, I tiptoed down the 2 flights of stairs and out the back door. The night air nearly choked me. It was so thick. The moisture coated my throat and felt heavy in the lungs. It was way different from the thin air back home. Once I got used to it, I gulped it in greedily. I tipped my head back and let the ocean breeze wash over me. I listened to the waves and bathed in the moonlight. My chest had been tight for days, but now, outside by the ocean, I could finally breathe. I wound my way down the path until I found the spot where Dad and I used to gaze at constellations and count the stars. It was just a small cutout, a place between dunes and wild grasses where the sand was soft and sheltered. I settled in and peered up. I found the 3 brightest stars in the eastern sky and traced the summer triangle with my finger. but I couldn't make out any of the constellations they belonged to. I couldn't recall their names without Dad here to remind me. The stars weren't as bright as I'd remembered, but the number of them still made me feel small and alone. I miss Dad for sure, but I also missed what our family was before, complete, balanced. Mom and Lainey on one side, me and Dad on the other. There was a natural divide down the middle. We hadn't never talked about it, but it was there. Mom and Lainey were the creatives, the free spirits. They were spontaneous. Dad and I were analyzers. We made plans and we overthought everything. The four of us had fit together perfectly somehow. At least it seemed that way to me. I found 4 stars in the sky making the shape of a square and assigned one to each of my immediate family members. I covered one of the stars with my thumb. With Dad missing, I didn't fit either. Without my father's star, the square became an L. Mom and Lainey still had each other, but on the other side was only me. It felt wobbly and lopsided. I'd have to work extra hard to stay connected to them. And what about all the things I'd have to give up? Dad said to do what I enjoyed, but there was no one to plan trips to the pier or get excited about a wildlife tour with. Things Lainey and Mom had zero interest in doing. My thoughts turned to Aiden. Maybe he could balance things out a while. But like everything else, he changed. Would he even want to hang out with me anymore? What if he thought my interests were stupid and childish now, and I still hadn't explained to him what was going on with my family? Rising to my feet, I made my way toward the property next door. The renovations to the back of the inn were more drastic than those out front. It had been freshened with a new coat of paint. The landscaping had been redone. The pool had been spruced up, and new beach chairs, umbrellas, and cabanas had been added. It almost looked like an entirely new resort. There were too many changes for me to take in all at once, and everything was so bright. When I turned away from the lights illuminating the stairway and pool area, spots of color dotted my view. Looking at the inn had wrecked my night vision. I stumbled a few steps toward the ocean, blinking until my vision cleared. Then I blinked a few more times until I realized the dark shadow in the waves wasn't going away as my eyesight returned. It took me a few seconds to figure out what I was seeing. A rush of excitement came over me when I did. It was a sea turtle. Its heart-shaped shadow coasted just below the surface. Its bulbous head bobbed above the waves. One flipper sent a tiny ocean spray into the night air. For a moment, the world felt okay again. Not things back to normal okay, but okay in the sense that I knew wonderful things still existed and life would bring joyful surprises when I least expected them. I ran to the surf and slipped out of my sandals and into the frothy waves lapping the beach. The salt water stung my bare skin just a little. It ebbed and flowed and ebbed again as my toes squished in the dampened sand, and I waded toward the gliding form. I knew better than to get too close, but I had to see. Was it a loggerhead, a green sea turtle, a hawksbill? I couldn't Google it the way Dad would have. My parents had dumbed down my cell phone, no internet, because they thought I was too young to be consumed by it. But if I snapped a photo and sent it to Dad, he would be able to tell. I barely managed to take a picture before the turtle dipped and disappeared into the deep. The photo turned out slightly blurry, and without the moon and stars, it was a little dark too. At least the outline of the turtle was clear, and I knew Dad would think the sighting extraordinary. I hit send on the phone, feeling another surge of excitement, when he responded immediately with, "Awesome, a loggerhead, so you're having a good time." I knew the moment had lifted his spirits too. I can do this, I thought to myself. I can move on like nothing happened. I can bury the pain. My family had enough to worry about. If I could act cheerful, they wouldn't have to worry about me too. If I could pretend I was happy, I knew it would make my parents happy. Then we'd all be okay, wouldn't we? We're going to stop there, and tomorrow we'll start on chapter 2, page 16. Please make sure you get this out of your Invest for Success bag and you're prepared to read along as we read this book over the next few days. Have a great day. See you again soon.